Welcome to Mainstream with Harpreet Singh. Toor, आप सबनों प्यार भरी सत श्री अकाल, नमस्कार, आदाब and shalom. First of all, we are actually stepping into the spring as of today, 21st of March. And we really never had a winter this year. Yes, we did have some cold spells, but not really like winter. So temperature are sometime down, but for a few days and then up again. So again, welcome to the spring, and also we also stepped into a new year based on the Nanak Shahi calendar, the one which is recognized by SGPC, not Purewal's Nanak Shahi calendar I'm talking about. And once again, Happy New Year on that. And we just passed the Holi also, and those who celebrate Holi, Sikhs celebrate Hola Mahalla, where they have all these from historical facts how they celebrated the wars, the fights, the horse riding, and all those amazing things. But this year some tragedy did happen. There was a gentleman, a young kid from Canada, who went to celebrate Hola Mahalla to Anandpur Sahib. He was killed there, stabbed and killed, just because he was trying to stop some people from doing something which he considered was not appropriate. And also we have our own issues of Amritpal Singh back home in Punjab, but I'm not going to talk about that here because this show is not about Punjab or just any particular state or any particular group of people. This program is about American politics and international politics and how those affect everything. But yes, there is one thing which I have to say about the blackout, the media blackout which took place in Punjab. That should not have happened. Yes, I understand social media is abused by everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people. And I sometimes get the messages, and when I call these people who send me the message that did you even read it or listen to it, they're like, no, they just forward it. So we are living in that part life, the evolution of humankind, if I may say, to the current situation, the human relationship on the social media and how it affects. And also artificial intelligence, which is another feature which I talk about here often on the show. Even though in America they say often, the word is actually often, T is silent. So I will say often, I will stick with often. I do talk often about the social media and developing technologies and stuff like that. So starting with what's going on here in America right now, Jimmy Carter, the former president of United States, who actually lost his election to Ronald Reagan in 1980s. He's in hospice, he's 98 years old, and when you look at the history, even though the most of the history will be written even when I will be gone, but right now the people do agree that he was one of the best presidents to ever have in the current time, even though he was the president only for one term, no doubt about it. Same thing with Bush Senior. Even though he was a president only for one term, but there were few things which he did in that one term which were great. And current sitting president Joe Biden, we don't know if he will rerun or not, and if he reruns again, whether he will win or not, we don't know yet. But there is one thing definitely about his presidency, that it will go down in history as one of the best president, at least in last about, I would say, 60 to 70 years. But interesting thing about Jimmy Carter's loss to Ronald Reagan, we all know that there was an issue of hostages in Iran, And we also know that hostages were released after Ronald Reagan took the oath. And I always suspected this thing and spoke to within my inner circles, my close friends, that everything is not kosher, like they say. It does not sound kosher. But now, finally, after 43 years, we have the gentleman, I'm going to give you the name right now, who came out with this news only day before yesterday, that he played a major role in making sure that Jimmy Carter does not get reelected. He was a prominent Texas politician, and Ben Barnes. Ben Barnes actually was from Texas. He did work to make sure that Ronald Reagan wins, Jimmy Carter loses, even though here you do have these people who have this character to say that no, I'll not take this position because I'm not eligible based on my experience and my education or whatever the reasons. But he wanted to be the director of CIA and or Secretary of State, which he didn't get. And he did get appointed, I think, as a Secretary of Energy. First he accepted, then he rejected it with Ronald Reagan. Even though he was a Democrat, but he was the one who went around to the Middle East countries, not Iran, but every other Middle East country which had one way or the other any communication with Iran at that time, to tell them to not to release the hostages before the election, because that would have given Jimmy Carter a leg up. But how the hostage situation developed to begin with, when the revolution took place in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini came in. The Shah of Iran, he actually fled Iran. He was looking for a political asylum. He sought asylum here in the United States. Jimmy Carter was reluctant to do that because he knew that the election is coming and it can become an issue. And he was also concerned about the Americans in Iran at that time. But his advisors, and based on whatever they discussed, which probably down the road we will find out, and some of the things are going to be in Jimmy Carter's library, the presidential library, he agreed to provide asylum to the Shah of Iran at that time, and that triggered the hostage crisis. The American embassy was surrounded by Iranians and it was attacked, and those people who were working there, they were captured and they were kept for, I think it was like 440 some days before they were released. And they were released only after President Ronald Reagan took the oath. And Mr. Barnes went around to all these Arabian countries giving a message that do not release the hostages before the election. And after the election, yes, there was a committee which sat down to investigate and do other stuff. Democrats were in majority in House and Senate at that time, but still what happened was nobody really reached up to that point. And now he finally came out. The reason he came out is because he knows that President Carter, the former President Carter, is in hospice right now which means he has very limited time. We don't know how long he will live because of his health issues, but he's a big fighter. He had a cancer and he fought it back. So God willing, I really pray that he still live around for some more time so that he can do what he has been doing. One of the most active ex-president who has done so much for the humankind. And when you go to the town where he grew up, those people, they feel pride in talking about him, talking to him, and how down to earth, just a normal person he was and he still is. So that crisis actually pushed Ronald Reagan to be the president. And rest is history. We have seen the policies of the Reagan where this trickle-down economic policy started from the Ronald Reagan. He was the one who said that give the tax break to rich people and they will invest the money for the poor people. It didn't happen. Rich became richer and middle class got pushed into poor class and poor became more poor. And that fight is still going on. And that is something which, again, the history is going to be the judge. But my judgment on Ronald Reagan basically from day one has been he was a good actor, but he was a so-so president. So let us take a break. After the break, we will be right back. Welcome back to Mainstream with Harpreet Singh Toor. The second thing which I touched on, the attack on Iraq after 9/11. What was interesting was that Colin Powell, who was the Secretary of State, he was not willing to go along, to go admit that, okay, Iraq does have weapons of mass destruction and make his boss, George W. Bush, happy about it. Because George W. Bush, after 9/11, wanted to invade Iraq. Let's put some pieces together. Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan. It was created from Saudi Arabia. Afghanistan was used against Russia, the Mujahideens and Talibans. If you remember, if you are old enough to remember, if not, then look into the history. Taliban was used to defeat Russians in Afghanistan by Americans by providing them some of the intelligence and the armaments and the money and supplying it through Pakistan. And after the collapse of Russia, when Russia pulled out from Afghanistan and USSR was not USSR anymore, it was just Russia, and the other countries went their own way, which is another, brings us to another thing, which is the current war between Ukraine and Russia. And right now, Chinese president is in Russia, but then again, let's stay where we are. So, Taliban and those Mujahideens, they decided to attack America. The reason they did it was, again, because I'm not a historian, I'm not a scholar on any fields, but there are things which, because I grew up in that part of the world, you just have to do some calculations to figure out what could have happened. So Taliban took over Afghanistan, and there was no supply of the money and armament and anything to Taliban, and they were so strict. Even today they are strict that the women could not go anywhere, and a lot of things, which are not acceptable to us, even to us as a being a Sikh, actually I feel more offended about it, that the women and the ladies and the girls are being kept away from getting the education and everything. But so they decided to teach a lesson to America that if you desert us, then there are consequences. So 9/11 happened. After 9/11, even though it was triggered from Afghanistan, and it was Tora Bora, where at that time, based on the intelligence, it was assumed that that's where Osama bin Laden is. But they let him escape from there, whatever the decision was, and then they attacked Iraq. They attacked Iraq only after Colin Powell spoke at United Nations to make a case for George W. Bush, the President of the United States, to attack Iraq, which was never supposed to be happen, but it did happen. No weapons of mass destruction were found, and I still remember there was a cartoon in one of the newspapers here where a question was posed to President George W. Bush about those weapons of mass destruction, and he literally, the cartoonist was humorous enough that showing the president looking under the table, his desk, looking for those weapons of mass destruction. And yes, they attacked Iraq, and the first thing which they did was, after attacking Iraq, yes, there was no resistance, not really much, from the army. And what happened after that was the first thing which Americans did, they actually dismantled the Iraqi army. And once they dismantled the Iraqi army, that started the civil war within Iraq. Those people who were actually in the army, they felt humiliated, they felt insulted. And for them, from putting a table on the food for the family and the kids and everybody, now they were somebody who became a joke for everybody, and they decided to fight. And that's where the civil war started. And of course, Iran has influence in Iraq, Saudi Arabia has its own things. Even that today, Iran and Saudi Arabia, they have come together. The fight is still going on in Yemen. Let's not forget that. Even though we do have a ceasefire over there for the time being. But the thing which I'm talking about is to look at the bigger picture. You have to look not just closely, but you have to look at from real high, like they say, look at from 100 feet above on the ground to, if you want to have more details on it. Okay? So with that, having said that, so civil war started in Iraq, and nobody is even giving the exact number of people who died in Iraq in that civil war. It's more than 500,000 people, rough estimate, but probably it is more than that. But nobody is taking any guesses. And who failed in this whole thing? The intelligence, which was twisted. Even media failed. Even though over here, you know, we do talk about the media being free compared to other countries, including India. But still, the people who own the media, they do listen to the people who have the money or who feed them. Look at the Fox News. All of a sudden, Fox is in a deep water because they were not telling the facts. They were making the lies as the news. But anyway, so media failed, intelligence failed, And the people who should have put their foot down, they failed. Colin Powell, I respect him a lot. I still respect him. I will always respect him. He was the only one, the second one actually, who caved in at the end to allow the Iraq war to happen. But there was a senator, Senator Byrd, B-Y-R-D, from Virginia. He spoke on the Senate floor for hours against the Iraq war. Hillary Clinton voted for Iraq war. Byrd was the only one who voted against Iraq war, and he spoke for hours on the Senate floor. And that is one of the best speech which anybody can talk about, read about, and those who are interested in this thing, they should look into it. Again, it is Senator Byrd, B-Y-R-D. And he was the one who opposed the war to the hilt as long as he could. And hence, Iraq war happened. And then, after Iraq, once they were not successful over there on Iraq war, they actually, even though they were still fighting Iraq war, they decided to go into Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, what happened, that is a literally current history. That's not even an ancient history. It's not even like 10 years old. Joe Biden pulled out from Afghanistan all the American forces. Yes, it was painful. It was not easy. It was humiliating. But that was the right decision based on what I think needed to be done. Because the people who are supposed to defend themselves, they were mired in corruption. We're going to talk about that, how Iraq and Afghanistan, they are still mired in corruption right after the break. Welcome back to Mainstream with Harpreet Singh Toor again. And yes, we're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan and the corruption, which is very much prevalent in that part of the world. Anyway, it's not that there is no corruption in the United States either, but there is, but it does not affect the normal life, most of it. But in those countries, yes, it does, including India. There's a lot of corruption, even though the newspapers are not covering it. That's where the media failure comes into this modern society. You know, that actually, before I really move into that, I would like to make a statement here that any democratic country, any democracy, its survival is based on two things. One is freedom of speech. Number two, the media, freedom of media, where the media actually covers, not plays to the masters, but actually provide their actual news. And Iraq war happened because the media failed. Yes, the other people failed also, but media also failed. And intelligence also played a major role. So right now, as 20 years after that war in Iraq, the corruption is so much, the people are really fed up from the corruption. And yeah, there are still people who at least they feel like that, okay, we can at least talk now as compared to when Saddam Hussein was around. But history actually is going to make a complete judgment on the whole thing. In any place, any country in the world, any state, if I may say so, if you want to succeed, any institution, if corruption is there, they cannot succeed, they cannot run for a long time. After that, there are going to be issues and there are going to be failures. So that actually brings me after Iraq America not being successful in Iraq, what was going on. Even though they do say they transferred over the power to the local elected officials, but there have been more than one election there, change of governments, but the people are not happy. Again, why? Because of corruption. And of course, Shia and Sunni fight is also going on there. Sometimes it comes in the open, sometimes it is not in the open so much, but that is still there. And in the meantime, in Afghanistan, the Afghan army collapsed because of corruption. There was an unlimited flow of funds from United States and some other countries. British slash UK was one of them. That was another one which was there, and to playing that, providing the money, but most of it was coming from United States. And that corruption actually was the one which actually became as a fatal blow at the withdrawal of the American troops. And the agreement to withdraw the American troops was made by the former President Donald Trump. Yes, the pullout was not good. It did not look good on the TV. It did not look good on the paper. But the agreement was signed by Donald Trump, and Joe Biden refused to go beyond that, because Joe Biden, first he was the senator when the whole Afghan thing started. Then he was the vice president with Barack Hussein Obama. And now he's the president. So he has literally seen the things up close. So he decided to put his foot down and pull out from Afghanistan at any cost, which he did, because it was an agreement which was signed, and he can literally say to the people who signed the agreement and to the world that we did agree to the agreement and stuck to the agreement, and we did what we should have done. After Taliban taking over Afghanistan again, even though they had said that they will keep some of the things open, the freedom for the women, the education for the women, and everything else, but somehow they have taken it away, the freedom for the women. You know what is interesting is that how the men, they actually work on how to control the women, which is very interesting. Over there, the women are controlled by keeping them, consigned to the houses, keeping them in the home, marrying them at the young age, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Over here, the women are controlled by using abortion, which is so interesting that here you give them the freedom to education, but at the same time, in that education, you use indoctrination of how to bring in your religious beliefs into it and push the women what the men want. And when the laws are passed, all these, they set up all these committees, the boards, elected officials, they make the laws. And where are the women? They are not there. There are few women who took the stand on that issue, but very few. Same thing in Afghanistan, there are very few women which are taking a stand. Right now still the fight is going on to give them the right for education, but how much they will succeed, I don't know, because the supreme commander of the Taliban, which is ruling Afghanistan, is actually not in Afghanistan. He is in one of the Middle East countries. I think he is in Qatar or Oman, one of those small Middle Eastern countries, and from there he is dictating everything. In the meantime, Western countries are withdrawing from providing fund and other services, other sports services, and who is suffering because of that? Again, it's either the children or the women. Those are the most vulnerable humans on the earth, the women and the children, and they are being used as a weapon. And if you really recall what happens in the life also, the women actually are used, the rape is used, rape of the women as another weapon by these fanatics. So coming to those issues, those are a constant fights, but they cannot be just pushed under the rug. Yeah, people try to ignore it. On the social media, we see all these new things coming up, and there is a constant move to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. But in that whole thing, we are forgetting the main ground which you have to stand on, and that ground is missing right now when we talk about it. And also, this then brings us to more close to house also within the United States. What is happening here? What is actually happening in the United States right now is we have the elections around the corner, 2024. It is funny that how the presidential election is not even over, even though the next election is 4 years down the road, but the whole thing starts again. The guessing game, who will succeed him, or who is going to be the next president, who will control the House, who will control the Senate, how they will control. There is a constant cycle of these elections. There is always election going on in this country. It is one election or the other. And next election, which is the 2024 election, in that election, what we are looking at actually is the field, even though it's still taking a shape, but we do have former President Donald Trump as a front runner on the Republican side. On Democratic side, we don't know yet, but let's take a break, and after that break, we'll talk about that. Welcome back to Mainstream. Now let us talk local politics. American politics, what is happening. 2024 is coming up, and we know that in Republican side, Donald Trump is a front runner right now. But we also know that there are a couple of cases going on, and he may get, arrested for one of those cases. And he actually declared on his social media platform, Truth Social, instead of Twitter, where he said that he will get arrested on Tuesday, and he asked his supporters to come out on the streets. One of the foundation and fundamental rule, and practically it was there in American history, that any sitting president who lost the election, the peaceful transfer of power, they will accept the incoming president, shake hands for him to walk into the White House, receive him at the White House, and then take the helicopter to go. Trump never did, the former president. Even though Trump did everything as a white majority, if I may say, to demonize Barack Obama as less intelligent and not a American and everything, whatever he could. Still, the former President Barack Obama received the elected president Donald Trump and his wife Mrs. Trump to the White House. But when Trump lost the election, he never conceded it. He did not receive the newly elected President Joe Biden to the White House. He tried everything to stick to the power. January 6th riot was a product of that, to stick to power. Even though he was told he lost the election, Bill Barr, who literally worked as if Donald Trump was a king and he was one of his coterie, even Bill Barr at a point, there came a point where he said, no, you did not win the election was fair, and he was made to resign, which he did. And there are still people who are fighting about this stolen election. My fellow CEO, then we have this Carrie Lake in Arizona and some other people. You know, at the beginning of my show, I was talking about democratic process. It's your involvement into it. But once you start sowing the seeds of lying, you know, they say if you lie something 100 times, it starts to appear as if truth, that it is true, but still it is a lie, which is proved down the road. But in the meantime, historically, a lot of things happen. Like Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan's win. History changed. It's a totally different history. We don't know how it would have been. The Supreme Court judgment in 2000 election between Al Gore versus George W. Bush. Supreme Court actually gave George W. Bush the presidency, even though Al Gore had more votes than him. Same thing with Hillary Clinton, but with the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump had more electoral college votes, even though more votes were casted for Hillary Clinton. With Joe Biden, even though he had the electoral votes as well as the other votes, but Donald Trump, the former president, refused to accept that, and he had the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, as one of his attorneys, fighting for him, building up the things on more lies. Excuse me. I'm sorry. So those lies were fed into. Now coming today, Donald Trump is actually calling out his supporters to come out. There's nothing wrong in peaceful demonstration, but when you come out or you ask people to come out on the street with armaments, you know, like they came on January 6th with the guns and everything, I always say, and I will always question this in my life for the rest of my life. I don't know how many among you would do that. That had it been a non-white mob, how it would have been treated. That takes me back to other countries where minorities are treated differently than the majority. In India, if a Bajrang Dal or any other extremist pushes a non-Hindu to do certain things, nobody says anything. But if a minority person says a single thing about the majority, immediately it becomes a big issue. In America, the question is, the Caucasian majority is afraid that they are going to lose their majority in this country. And there are Republicans who actually are saying to declare America as a Christian country. It should be a, and anybody who is not a Christian should be treated differently. And Donald Trump openly is saying that any person who is not Caucasian, even though he did not mention Caucasian, but the way he put up everybody else, the minorities, that they should be arrested even for a minor infringement and put them behind the bars for the rest of their life. Same thing for any minority candidate or any minority person. Building the wall. Yeah, I understand that it should not be a free flow. But at the same time, the walls do not help. The current history, look at East and West Germany. There was a wall between East and West. The wall in the Berlin. Berlin was divided into East and West Germany. But what happened? Ultimately, that wall came down. Building the borders is not going to help anybody. There were times then it could have helped, but these days they are not going to help. Because we have, these smartphones in our hands, which actually go on giving us, guiding us, telling us a lot of things, which then we made our decisions based on that. And that is where we should be aware of, we should know that these walls which are being propagated, they are actually done to create a friction within the society, within the communities. And there are elements like the other day, the Congresswoman Bobert made a statement about that how 100 bullet magazine is not considered as a gun for the sports purpose. Give me a break. The way the bullets are fired like that, they are done on the battlefield. And if she doesn't know how it is, then she should go to the border of Ukraine and Russia war where it is going on right now. That's where we have, and she will see over there what's going on, and she will be able to look at it and then would know the difference. They talk about this right of the Second Amendment, but Second Amendment never said that you can carry the gun to kill anybody who does not agree with you. So I think it is about time for us to sit back and think about it from what has been done in last 20, 40, 50 years, and where we should be, where our kids should be in next 40, 50 years. That is very important if we want our kids to have a better future. So having said that, till next time, good night and good luck.
जापान के प्रधानमंत्री फुमियो किशिदा 2 दिन के भारत दौरे पर नई दिल्ली पहुंचे थे। सोमवार को यहां उन्होंने राजघाट पहुंचकर महात्मा गांधी को श्रद्धांजलि दी। इसके बाद हैदराबाद हाउस में किशिदा ने प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से मुलाकात की। दोनों लीडर्स के बीच डेलीगेशन लेवल की बातचीत हुई। जापानी प्रधानमंत्री किशिदा ने कहा, मैंने पीएम मोदी को हिरोशिमा में होने वाले G7 समिट के लिए न्योता दिया और उन्होंने इसे स्वीकार भी कर लिया है। वहीं पीएम मोदी ने कहा, मैं पीएम किशिदा का भारत में स्वागत करता हूं। मेरी उनसे पिछले 1 साल में कई बार मुलाकात हुई है। इस दौरान मुझे हमेशा दोनों देशों के बीच संबंध को लेकर पॉजिटिविटी महसूस हुई। आज मैंने उनसे हमारे G20 अध्यक्षता की प्राथमिकताओं के बारे में बात की। हमारा लक्ष्य सभी को साथ लेकर चलना है। इस साल जापान G7 और भारत G20 की अध्यक्षता कर रहा है। जापानी प्रधानमंत्री की यात्रा से दोनों देशों को G20 और G7 के बीच सहयोग लाने का मौका मिला। दोनों लीडर्स ने इस बारे में चर्चा भी की कि कैसे फूड एंड हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन और इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी पर G20 और G7 देश एक साथ काम कर सकते हैं। आइए सुनते हैं दोनों देशों के प्रधानमंत्रियों ने क्या कुछ कहा।
हम लॉजिस्टिक्स, फूड प्रोसेसिंग, MSME, टेक्सटाइल्स, मशीनरी और स्टील जैसे क्षेत्रों में भारतीय इंडस्ट्री की कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस बढ़ा रहे हैं। आज हमने इस पार्टनरशिप की सक्रियता पर भी प्रसन्नता व्यक्त की। मुंबई अहमदाबाद हाई स्पीड रेल पर भी हम तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। मुझे इस बात की भी खुशी है कि हम 2023 को टूरिज्म एक्सचेंज वर्ष के रूप में मना रहे हैं और इसके लिए हमने कनेक्टिंग हिमालयाज विद माउंट फुजी नाम का थीम चुना है। फ्रेंड्स, आज प्रधानमंत्री किशिदा ने मुझे मई महीने में हिरोशिमा से में होने वाली G7 लीडर समिट के लिए निमंत्रण दिया। इसके लिए मैं उनका हृदय से धन्यवाद करता हूं। इसके कुछ महीनों बाद सितंबर में G20 लीडर समिट के लिए मुझे प्रधानमंत्री किशिदा का फिर से भारत में स्वागत करने का अवसर मिलेगा। हमारी बातचीत और संपर्कों का यह सिलसिला इसी प्रकार चलता रहे और भारत जापान संबंध लगातार नई ऊंचाइयों को छूते रहे।
I formally invited Prime Minister Modi to G7 Hiroshima Summit, and on the spot, my invitation was immediately accepted. Regarding the strengthening of our bilateral relations with India, who is our special strategic global partner, wide-ranging discussion also took place. In security area, holding of second Japan-India 2+2 meeting last September, and implementing Japan-India joint fighter exercise for the very first time in January this year were welcomed as concrete progress.
Now, economic cooperation with India, which continues to grow rapidly, will not only support further development of India, but also creates significant economic opportunities for Japan. In this regard, we welcome that steady progress is being made towards realizing 5 trillion yen of public and private investment and financing from Japan to India in 5 years, the target which Prime Minister Modi and I set in March last.
बातचीत में बताया गया कि दुनिया के सबसे अमीर 7 देशों के संगठन G7 की बैठक मई 2023 में जापान में हो रही है और उसमें हिस्सा लेने के लिए किशिदा ने पीएम मोदी को भी आमंत्रित किया। मोदी पहले भी G7 की बैठक में विशेष आमंत्रित सदस्य के तौर पर हिस्सा लेते रहे हैं। भारत और जापान के बीच विभिन्न क्षेत्रों में साझेदारी है, जिसमें रक्षा और सुरक्षा, व्यापार और निवेश, विज्ञान और प्रौद्योगिकी, शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य सेवा और महत्वपूर्ण और उभरती हुई प्रौद्योगिकियां शामिल हैं। किशिदा फुमियो ने नरेंद्र मोदी से मुलाकात में ये स्पष्ट किया कि भारत और जापान परंपरागत मित्र हैं। दोनों देशों के संबंध नई इबारत लिख रहे हैं। क्वाड से लेकर बुलेट ट्रेन के समझौते तक जापान हमेशा से भारत का साझेदार रहा है। इसकी पृष्ठभूमि पीएम मोदी और स्वर्गीय जापानी प्रधानमंत्री शिंजो आबे ने ताकत के साथ रखी थी। इस मीट के बाद उम्मीद जताई जा रही है कि जापान और भारत के रिश्ते जो पहले से अच्छे हैं और ज्यादा अच्छे हो सकते हैं, और इस पर बहुत ज्यादा रूस यूक्रेन जो युद्ध चल रहा है उस पर भी जापान के प्रधानमंत्री ने पीएम मोदी से बातचीत की और उसे रोकने के बहुत सारे जो भी सफल कारण हो सकते हैं उन पर बातचीत और चर्चा की।